right, so my name is James Tierney. I'm a lecturer at Penn State University, and I've been there for 2 years, mainly teaching currently intermediate macroeconomics. So today's talk is going to focus a lot on the intermediate and upper level skills that we're teaching our students, and we can have a discussion on how you can bring these also to the intro level, but as you'll see, most of it is based on our business students, our econ majors and minors who are going to be entering into the business world. And there are some skills outside of economics that employers are having a tough time finding. And is there a way that we as instructors can make sure that we're teaching those as well? And so the title is, When Will I Need This Again? Because this is one thing from my class just I did a couple of weeks ago. So it's a search model where firms are deciding whether or not they're going to open up vacancies. And so it's important for students to understand relationships. Okay, as the real wage changes, how is the opening up of vacancies going to change with it? But really, that's what they need to know. I can just write that in one line. So why do I have this big, long model that I have them figure out? Because this is what most of my students look like once I give them this model. So we're going to talk about 5 main things that employers are having a tough time finding, and maybe that's what we're really teaching our students. So we're going to start with preparedness, which is a word. I didn't know that at first, but preparedness is a word. And why do we care about our students being prepared? Well, first thing, it shows the employers that you can be prepared for a big event or a big meeting. And that's something that's really, really important for all employers, even in the NFL, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit as well. Also, our students, like I said, majors and minors who are going into the business world, going into the financial world, need to be able to work under pressure. And so we as instructors should be providing a little bit of pressure on them, saying, hey, get this done. You got to be punctual. You have to do this. Here's a long, stressful exam. So that way, when they get their first job and the boss says, hey, sorry, but we got this thing pushed up till tomorrow. You got to stay tonight. We've really got to finish this out. They're like, okay, but I know how important this was back in college, and we can teach some of these more soft skills to them. How do we do it? I have long, stressful, and difficult exams. For my intermediate macro course, we just had one Wednesday night, with an article in there. It was 21 pages, 2 hours, and most students don't finish on time. And it's very difficult. They know it's difficult. We go in and we prepare for it, and it's just the way it ends up being for my students. And they're like, okay, and I explain this to them. I say, one of the reasons why I have long, difficult, stressful exams is because I am trying to prepare you for when this stuff comes up in the real world as well. And so I was listening to Mike and Mike on the radio, ESPN radio, and they went through this whole thing about the NFL Combine. So if you're not aware, the NFL Combine is where all the incoming players that are trying to get drafted do a bunch of these activities that are not really useful when it comes to actually playing in an NFL game, like running a 40 or the number of reps you can do with a whole bunch of weight. Like in a football game, like you're not doing that stuff. And so they're having a debate on should we get rid of the NFL Combine. And Mike Golick, who was in the NFL, comes back and says something really interesting at the end about being prepared and why and how it's not necessarily what you are accomplishing, it's the preparation of it. And so this is like a 30-second clip.
Thank you, Mike. The NFL Football Scouting, Inc., which runs the Combine, was quoted, the president of that group, Jeff Foster, says, quote, our first focus is to look at what we do currently and make sure that it's relevant. To your point a minute ago with Mel about how they're going to change things, the story here I'm reading from USA Today says, no, a quarterback's throwing session won't be swapped for one in a virtual reality environment. But the days of players training for months to score high in tests such as the 40-yard dash, the vertical leap, and the bench press, sometimes derided as the underwear Olympics, could be numbered. New England coach Bill Belichick is among those to criticize combine preparation as a waste of development time. Your thoughts?
Well, I think it is. Now, let me first say that if these are the tests and the players go to a bunch of these places around the country that specialize in prepping you for your combine and your pro day, And this isn't any rip on them, because I think they do a great job. My boys went to them, and they were fantastic. Went to API out in Phoenix, or on Scottsdale, and it was great. And there's plenty of great companies around the country that do this. They're preparing you for what the NFL is asking you to do. So when I talk about how I don't put a lot into it, the players should. You need to show up to the combine and or your pro day ready to perform those tasks, because if you don't, that's going to be on you as far as your prep. If you didn't prep to do something, forgetting the number that you did, it's going to be your work ethic will get questioned as, okay, you may not like the fact that you have to run a 40, but you better prepare to do it. That's something I think that's important.
I love that last line. It was like, you may not like that you have to run a 40, but you're asked to do it, you better prepare. Because if you don't prepare for it, then who cares if you can run a 40 at what speed, but can you spend months preparing for something? Because if I'm going to bring you into the NFL, I need to make sure that you have that work ethic. And so we have that same thing with our students. And I talk to my students a lot about what happens in their interview process, and they say they get questions like, was there ever a time in college where you felt super, super unprepared and you had to go and do something? Or was there a time in college where you were very stressed out? Explain that to me. How did you respond to that? And if we are going to continue going down a path where, we want to make things easier because it's better for our evals, the students like us more, they're not going to be able to answer those questions. Or they're not going to be able to answer those questions truthfully and say, yeah, I was really prepared because I was super stressed out for this exam. It was a 20-page exam, but I got through it. I didn't get 100%, but I prepared pretty well. The second thing is punctuality and reliability. They say, okay, well, why do I try and teach these skills to my students? Businesses can't find people who are reliable. They can't. And I can prove it to you because the New York Fed does a monthly, the Empire State and Manufacturing Survey and Business Leaders Survey, and once a year they ask this question. They ask, to what extent have you recently had difficulty finding workers who are proficient in each of the following areas? And you can see the basic math skills, the basic computer skills, but those last two to me are very important. Interpersonal skills, punctuality, and reliability. And if you look on both of the surveys, they're saying they're finding a difficult time to find people who are just punctual and reliable. They're having a difficult time doing that. So how can we as instructors help that out? How can we do that? How can we make our students more punctual and more reliable? Well, first of all, it's a pretty easy, simple skill, hopefully, to get students just to be a little more punctual, a little more reliable. And so how are we going to do this? First thing I do is I make sure all the assignments are due. They have to be turned in on time. There's no late policy. There's no, oh, sorry, I missed the bus or the printers didn't work. No, sorry, it's due at 11:59 p.m. It's not at 11:59 p.m. I don't care if it's at midnight. I don't care if 5 minutes late. You have to be working ahead. You have to be super punctual. And I'm very strict when it comes to turning in assignments that way. Also, I make sure my class is worth it, meaning that hopefully the marginal benefit of attending is greater than their marginal cost. But I also don't require attendance. Much to the, my department chair doesn't like this. They think in my syllabus should say that attendance is required, even though I can't take attendance because it's big classes. But I tell them up front, I say, I want you to make this conscious choice of, is my class worth it to come? Are the costs outweighing it? Then you should stay home. How can I teach marginal thinking to my students and start forcing them to come to class? I say, it's always your option. But how reliable are they going to be? Sure, my intermediate macro course, 220 students, usually it's about 120, 130 who end up showing up to lecture. But that reflects in the 40% drop / SD rate that I end up getting at the end of the semester as well. Next time they come and take it, they're usually there, they're more punctual, they're a little more reliable. And so maybe they have to fail once to kind of get that through their head. The next one is maybe we should be teaching a little more about organization, a little more about being neat. And how can we do this? In the real world, especially if we're business students, they're going to be doing multiple tasks all the time. You're doing multiple tasks right now. I know you are. We're all doing multiple tasks at all the time. And so we need to make sure that students can be organized so when they have to go multitask, they can. Also, notes never stop. Students don't get, they think, I'm out of school now, I'm never going to take any notes. Why? I'll just take these. No, you're taking notes all the time. I see people in here right now taking notes. Every day I make a to-do list with a bunch of notes on it. Right? And I have this really bad habit of when I'm taking notes for myself, they're super messy. Sometimes I end up not doing something I was supposed to do because I wasn't neat enough. That's something I know that I have to work on. How can we do this with our students? Well, one thing I do is I never have my assignments due on the same day. And I used to do this. I used to say, hey, everything's always going to be due on, every other Wednesday we have something due. Or every other Monday we have something due. But what I found out is that a lot of students are just getting into this habit. So they don't have to be organized at all. Oh, it's Wednesday, I got to do this. It's Wednesday, I got to do that. So the way that I've set my class up now is we have 11 lessons. At the end of each lesson, the day we finish the material, I open up an online quiz and they have 3 days to do it. So if I finish it on Monday, it's due Thursday. Wednesday, it's due Saturday. Friday, it's due Monday night. And I don't tell them, unless they're in class, when we finish the material. And so it gives them a little reason to come, and then most students find out anyway, because on the online program, it'll tell you when it's due, but they can't get into this relaxation mode of, okay, it's every Wednesday I have something due. They have to be, okay, well, I can make sure I write it down. I better be organized. I also make sure that these models, especially like I was talking about in my intermediate class, are so complex that they better keep their notes neat, or they are not going to be able to study from those notes. Also, I try and make my class, I hope my class is this way, and the only way you can really truly succeed is if you take these neat notes, and if you are organized, and if you don't miss these deadlines. And so if you have all of these skills, you're going to succeed in my class, which, yeah, I like when you succeed. You leave me a better evaluation. But I care more when I get a student who comes back and says, hey, I got this job, and your class really pushed me to get this job, and I answered an interview question because of your class. And that's one of the best feelings I could ever get. So when I take notes for them, I try and be super neat. So like here would be a sample of my notes. And as you can tell, this is like a full day's lecture on labor supply. So I don't take a lot of notes that they end up seeing me take. But the idea is that you better be there in class, take notes on other stuff. You have to be neat and organized in order to succeed. The next thing, being personable, is a skill that I think is very important that our students need to learn. Why? Well, remember this thing? The fifth one down is the personable skills. They can't find people who are personable. So how can we convince our students that this is important? Well, I do show this to my class the first day, every single class. I show them there are some skills that you need to know that employers are saying they can't find. Right? The Wall Street Journal just did a 2-part series on these soft skills, like being able to email someone correctly, being able to shake someone's hand and look them in the eye correctly. They just can't find these people. So I try and make it, yes, you need to know this stuff. You need to know this stuff. We can use these data to look at that. So employers want it. How can we do this? Well, the first thing is I make sure my material is pretty difficult, so they have to ask for help. Maybe from me, maybe from a tutor, maybe from somewhere else, but they're not going to be able to just sit there and figure everything out for themselves. They're going to need to ask for help, a classmate or something like that. I also hold students to a high standard when it comes to communication, especially through email or discussion board or anything like that. I don't respond to, hey, prof, when's the thing due? No, I don't respond to that. I actually, wrote an article on my website that's just like, how do you email a professor? And we've seen these floating around everywhere. BuzzFeed does one like every single year that talks about how you should email a professor. And so I send this out to them right away. I say, you need to start learning how to communicate not via text. Because our students feel that email, even professional email, is just a messaging system. And it's just like, hey, when's it due? Hey, okay, thanks, bye. No, that's not how we're going to be communicating. Your boss doesn't want that, and so we got to make sure we're making our students aware that this is important. So the stuff we talked about. When will I ever use this again? Probably not. All right, when are my students ever going to, even in a class of 220, use a search model for labor and vacancies and talk about the beverage curve again in their lives? Maybe 2 of them go on to some sort of graduate program, a master's degree or PhD program, and then no one wants to do macroeconomics anyway, so they're probably not going to be using this stuff. So they're not necessarily using the skills that the end result, but it's that process of getting to that result that I think is very important. I think we need to, as educators, remind ourselves of that every now and then, and also not be afraid to inform our students that that's what we're doing. Because they say, why am I learning this stuff? I may never need this huge model. That's true, but you need to be stressed out every now and then. You need to make sure you're prepared. And there's all these soft skills that we as educators are already doing, and we maybe just need to kind of communicate that to our students a little better so they understand. And so what are we learning in all these processes? I'll just put them all up here so we can talk about them. Being personable, neatness, organization, all of these things are what I think we need to be holding our students to. We have these standards that we should hold our students to. And so my favorite quote from Stephen Colbert, any standards worth having will be a challenge to meet. And really, that's something that we should be telling our students. Right? You need to hold yourself to high standards, and I, as an instructor, am going to hold you to high standards as well. Because if it's really easy to get through my class, and then you go out into the real world and it's not really easy to get through the real world, what am I doing for you? And that's it. Thank you so much for listening.